Of all the Emperor's sons, only one knew how he would die, and chose to stand anyway. In the Imperium of Man, history is not merely remembered, it is sanctified. Events are carved into stone, polished into legend, and stripped of contradiction. Heroes are reduced to symbols, failures are buried beneath reverence. What remains is not truth, but myth, powerful, unquestioned, and eternal. Yet even within the brutal mythology of the Imperium, there are figures who resist simplification. Names spoken with a reference that borders on grief. Figures remembered not only for what they achieved, but for what was lost with them. Among all the Emperor's sons, one stands apart: Sanguinius. To the Imperium, he is the great angel, the image of perfection made flesh, a Primarch without equal in grace or nobility, a being so radiant that even his brothers, engineered demigods all, looked upon him with awe. To the Blood Angels, he is more than a Primarch. He is a father, a martyr, a wound that will never heal. And to history itself, Sanguinius is a paradox. He was everything the Imperium wished to be, and everything it could never remain. Unlike his brothers, Sanguinius bore a curse that no armour could shield him from. He saw the future, not in riddles or vague portents, but in moments of terrible clarity. He saw betrayal before it occurred. He saw the Imperium burning long before the first shot of the heresy was fired. And most of all, he saw his own death, not as a distant possibility, not as a branching path that may be avoided, but as a certainty. And yet, when the time came, he did not flee. He did not turn aside. He did not attempt to rewrite fate. He walked towards it. To understand why, we must return to the beginning, to a dying world beneath a poisoned sun, where an angel fell into fire, radiation, and blood. The child cast into ruin. The Primarchs were never meant to be scattered. They were the culmination of the Emperor's greatest work, beings of impossible strength, intellect, and presence, crafted to lead humanity out of the darkness of old night. Each Primarch was unique, embodying a different aspect of the Emperor's vision for the future of mankind. Together, they would have been unstoppable, but the warp intervened. Through treachery and sorcery, the gestation chambers containing the Primarchs were torn open, one by one. The Emperor's sons were hurled across the galaxy, cast into the void, and deposited upon worlds not of his choosing. Some landed on planets of relative stability, others where civilization endured, where power structures already existed. Others were cast onto worlds of endless war, cruelty, and decay. Sanguinius fell to Baal. Even by the merciless standards of the Age of Strife, Baal was a sentence of slow extinction. Radiation, monsters, and survival. The Baal system was dying. Baal Primus had long since perished, its surface scoured into lifeless ruin by radiation storms and ecological collapse. Baal Secundus survived only because its people were too resilient, too stubborn to surrender to extinction. The planet was a wasteland of scorched desert, toxic seas, and poisoned skies. Radiation storms swept across the land without warning. The soil itself was lethal in places, and the creatures that roamed the waste were warped by mutation and hunger. Humanity clung to life in scattered tribes, isolated and hardened by generations of struggle. Those people knew only survival. Compassion was a luxury. Mercy, a weakness that could not be afforded. It was here, upon this dying world, that the infant Primarch landed. From the moment of his arrival, Sanguinius was different. As he grew, vast white wings unfurled from his back. Powerful, radiant, and unmistakably inhuman. On Baal, mutation was not uncommon. Most mutations were grotesque, unstable, or fatal. Mutants were feared, hunted, or cast out for the safety of the tribe. By all logic, Sanguinius should have been killed. Instead, he was spared. There was something about him that defied instinctive fear. His presence inspired trust, where suspicion should have reigned. Though his wings marked him as different, his actions marked him as protector rather than predator. He did not dominate the tribes through force, though his strength was undeniable. He fought only when necessary, and always in defense of others. He hunted the rad beasts that stalked the weak. He shielded settlements from marauding predators. He taught survival, cooperation, and restraint. In a world where cruelty was the norm, Sanguinius chose mercy. This choice would shape everything that followed. Leadership through compassion. Sanguinius did not rule Baal Secundus as a tyrant or as a king. He lived among the tribes. He bled as they bled. He endured the same hunger, the same radiation sickness, the same losses. Where others might have claimed authority through fear, Sanguinius earned loyalty through example. He stood at the front of every battle. He shared in every hardship. When the people of Baal suffered, he suffered with them. This forged an unbreakable bond. The tribes followed Sanguinius, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in him. They saw in him not a god, but a guardian, not a ruler, but a leader who would never abandon them. From Baal, Sanguinius learned a truth that many of his brothers never fully grasped, that strength without empathy breeds resentment, not loyalty. That fear may enforce obedience, but it can never inspire devotion. These lessons became the foundation of his philosophy of leadership. Yet, even as he united the tribes of Baal Secundus, doubt gnawed at him. He knew what he was. He knew that beyond Baal, in a galaxy that feared deviation and mutation, his wings could not be seen as a blessing, but as heresy made flesh. He had seen what fear did to men. He had seen how quickly reverence could turn to violence. And so, despite the love of his people, Sanguinius carried a quiet dread, a fear not of death, but of judgment. The arrival of the Emperor was not subtle. Golden warships descended from orbit, their engines shaking the poisoned skies. Legions of gene-forged warriors marched across the wasteland, their armour gleaming against the ash and sand. For the people of Baal, it was as if the stars themselves had come to claim them. For Sanguinius, it was the moment he had long feared. He did not greet his father with triumph or pride. He approached the Emperor, not as a conqueror meeting his creator, but as a son awaiting judgment. He knelt, wings folded, head bowed, and offered his life freely, if his existence was deemed a flaw. He did not beg. He did not protest. He accepted the possibility of death. The Emperor did not strike him down. He embraced him. In that moment, every doubt Sanguinius had carried since childhood was swept away. His wings were not a mutation to be purged. They were not a flaw. They were part of the Emperor's design, a symbol of which humanity could become. Sanguinius was not an aberration. He was perfect. The Emperor's acceptance did not banish all of Sanguinius's doubts. Though he was embraced as a son and hailed as a Primarch, Sanguinius could not so easily shed the fear that had grown with him since childhood. He knew how the Imperium viewed mutation. He understood the brutal logic that governed survival across a hostile galaxy. His wings made him exceptional. They also made him vulnerable. Sanguinius feared that what the Emperor accepted, the Imperium might one day reject. That reverence could turn to fear. That fear could turn to violence. And perhaps most of all, he feared what his wings symbolized. They marked him as different, not merely from humanity, but from his brothers. Even among the Primarchs, Sanguinius stood apart. This knowledge weighed heavily upon him as he prepared to meet his legion for the first time. Before Sanguinius took command, the 9th Legion already possessed a grim reputation. Originally known as the Revenant Legion, they were feared even by their allies. Their gene seed carried a dark flaw that drove them towards savagery and cannibalism. They fought with terrifying efficiency, but little restraint, earning victories at the cost of reputation and trust. The Emperor did not destroy them. Instead, he endured them and waited. When Sanguinius was reunited with his legion, the transformation was immediate and profound. Where the Revenant Legion had been brutal and uncontrolled, the Blood Angels under Sanguinius became disciplined without losing their ferocity. He imposed structure, ritual, and honor. He demanded excellence not merely in battle, but in conduct. Sanguinius did not deny his son's flaws. He acknowledged them and taught them to master those flaws rather than to surrender to them. For the first time, the Legion had a father who understood them. Sanguinius did not rule the Blood Angels through fear or punishment. He held his sons to impossibly high standards, not because he wished to dominate them, but because he believed that they could be better. He encouraged art, philosophy, and self-reflection, fostering a culture that valued beauty and creation as much as destruction. This was not indulgence, it was control. Sanguinius understood that if the Blood Angels surrendered entirely to violence, the red thirst would consume them. Discipline, ritual, and identity were the only barriers standing between his legion and damnation. And for a time, they held. The Blood Angels became one of the most celebrated legions of the Great Crusade, admired not only for their martial prowess, but for the nobility with which they waged war. They struck swiftly and decisively, minimizing unnecessary suffering wherever possible. They were angels of death, but angels nonetheless. Among his brothers, Sanguinius was widely admired. Horus respected him. Guilliman trusted him. Even those Primarchs who valued strength above compassion recognized Sanguinius's worth. There were many who believed that, had fate been kinder, Sanguinius would have made the ideal war master. Yet Sanguinius never sought such a role. He understood the weight of command too well. He knew that leadership on such a scale would place him at the center of events he could not escape. Events he had already seen unfold in fragments of nightmare and prophecy. And so he served faithfully, brilliantly, without ambition, a curse held at bay. Despite all Sanguinius's efforts, the red thirst could never fully be eradicated. It lingered beneath the surface of the Legion, a hunger that could erupt under stress, injury, or exhaustion. Sanguinius recognized it for what it was, not a moral failing, but a genetic curse woven into their very creation. He feared it, not because it made his sons dangerous, but because it reflected something within himself. Sanguinius understood the pull of violence, the temptation to abandon restraint, to surrender to the savage clarity of rage, but he did not. He mastered it, and by doing so he taught his legion that damnation was not inevitable, that choice still mattered, even in a galaxy that seemed determined to strip it away. Throughout the Great Crusade, Sanguinius fought a war no one could see. His visions continued, flashes of futures not yet written, but already bleeding into the present. He saw brother turn against brother. He saw the Imperium tearing itself apart from within. And always, he saw himself standing at the center of it. He did not speak of these visions. He feared the knowledge of the future would become a weapon. Or worse, a justification. If fate could not be changed, then what meaning did choice hold? Sanguinius refused to answer that question. Instead, he chose to act as though every decision still mattered. As the Great Crusade neared its zenith, cracks began to form. Horus was elevated to War Master. Trust shifted. Whispers spread. Sanguinius sensed the coming storm long before it broke. His visions grew darker, more incessant. He knew that something catastrophic approached, something that would test every bond he held dear. And yet, when Horus called upon him, Sanguinius did not hesitate. He answered the call, because loyalty to Sanguinius was not conditional. Sanguinius had been shaped by Baal, accepted by the Emperor, beloved by his legion. He stood at the height of his power, disciplined, revered, and burdened by knowledge no one else possessed. The war had not yet begun, but fate was already moving. After the Emperor's triumphs, after the glory of the Great Crusade, Sanguinius should have known peace. Instead, the future pressed closer. His visions no longer came as fleeting images or half-remembered dreams. They arrived with weight and clarity, fragments of events yet to come, stitched together by blood and fire. The line between present and future blurred, and Sanguinius found himself haunted, not by what might be, but by what would be. He saw brothers turning on one another. He saw worlds burning beneath the banners of the Imperium. And always, standing at the centre of it all, was Horus. Not yet crowned in damnation. Not yet fallen, but changed. Sanguinius did not know how or when Horus would betray the Imperium. Only that the betrayal was inevitable. That knowledge gnawed at him relentlessly, because Horus was not merely a brother in arms, he was a friend. Horus Lupercal trusted Sanguinius. That trust was real. Among the Primarchs, relationships were often strained by rivalry, ideology, or ambition. Sanguinius, however, inspired admiration almost universally. His humility disarmed arrogance. His compassion tempered brutality. Even those that valued strength above all else respected him. Horus valued him more than most. When Horus spoke to Sanguinius, it was not as war master to subordinate, but as brother to brother. He sought his counsel. He listened. He shared doubts and victories alike. And Sanguinius, despite his visions, did not reject that trust. He could not. To accuse Horus without proof would be to shatter everything the Imperium stood upon. Prophecy was not evidence. Visions were not certainty, not in a galaxy where lies wore the masks of truth. So Sanguinius said nothing. And when Horus sent him into the Signus system, Sanguinius obeyed. By the time of the Signus campaign, Horus's authority was absolute. As War Master, his word carried the Emperor's will across the stars. To refuse a command was unthinkable. To question it was dangerous. The mission to Signus appeared routine on the surface. A distant system, reports of resistance, a compliance action requiring decisive force. But to Sanguinius, something felt wrong. The unease was subtle, a tightening in his chest, a pressure behind his thoughts. The vision stirred, but did not coalesce. There was no clear warning, no unmistakable sign, only dread. Still, Sanguinius went, because loyalty, to him, was not conditional. It was absolute. The journey to Signus was marked by growing disquiet. Astropathic messages became erratic. Vox transmissions carried echoes where none should exist. Navigators reported disturbances in the warp, not violent, but watchful, as though something waited just beyond perception. Sanguinius felt it. The psychic atmosphere of the system pressed against him like a weight. The warp itself seemed taut, stretched thin, ready to tear. As the Blood Angels translated into real space, the sense of wrongness intensified. The stars of the Signus system burned too brightly. The void shimmered with unnatural hues. Even hardened Astartes felt it. An unspoken tension, a quiet sense that something unseen observed them. Sanguinius ordered heightened readiness. It would not be enough. Signus Prime was revealed not as a world to be conquered, but as a blasphemy given form. What appeared at first as a bastion of resistance quickly unravelled into something far worse. The planet itself was corrupted, a shrine world shaped by demonic influence, its surface twisted to serve a single purpose, to draw the angel in. The ambush was meticulously prepared, warp rifts tore open across the battlefield. Demonic legions surged forth in numbers beyond calculation. The Blood Angels, carefully planned assault, dissolved into chaos within moments. Formations shattered, command structures fractured. Companies were annihilated before they could regroup. The Blood Angels fought with ferocity and discipline, but discipline alone could not hold out against the immaterial. This was not a war, it was a sacrifice. The slaughter was immediate and overwhelming. Demons of Khorne hurled themselves into the Blood Angels' ranks with unrestrained savagery. Blades rang against armour. Blood soaked the corrupted earth. Vox channels screamed with overlapping orders and death cries. Sanguinius fought at the heart of the storm. Where he went, the demons recoiled. His presence cut through the madness like a blade. His wings carried him across the battlefield, striking where the line threatened to collapse, rallying his sons through example rather than command. But even the angel could not be everywhere. Losses mounted, veterans fell, Entire squads vanished beneath waves of demonic fury, and as the bloodshed escalated, something stirred within the Legion. The Red Thirst. At first, it was subtle, heightened aggression, blows struck with greater force, kill counts rose, then discipline began to fray. As the battle dragged on, the Red Thirst clawed at the Blood Angel's restraint. The sheer scale of the violence, the proximity of blood and death, tore at the barriers Sanguinius spent decades reinforcing. Some warriors fought with wild abandon, others lingered too long over fallen foes. The line between controlled fury and bloodlust blurred. Sanguinius felt it, not as an external threat, but as a reflection of his own pain. Because as the battle raged, something far worse approached. The warp convulsed. A presence announced itself, not through sound, but through pressure, an overwhelming sense of rage, hatred, and ancient malice. Even the demons seemed to recoil as the air itself thickened with power. Kabanda had arrived, a bloodthirster of immense age and strength. Kabanda was not merely another servant of Khorne. He was a chosen champion, shaped for a singular purpose: to face the angel, to break him. Sanguinius knew, in that moment, that the visions had led him here, and that this was only the beginning. Kabanda did not come to Signus Prime to win a war. Wars were beneath him. He came for Sanguinius. To the bloodthirster, the angel was an insult. A being of restrained violence, of mercy and beauty, carrying within him the capacity for infinite slaughter, yet refusing to embrace it. In Sanguinius, Kabanda saw everything Khorne despised and coveted in equal measure. Perfection denied. Kabanda believed that the angel belonged to Khorne, that all his restraint was a lie, waiting to be broken, that beneath the wings and nobility lay a rage worthy of the blood god. And Signus Prime was built to prove it. When Sanguinius and Kabanda finally met, the battlefield itself seemed to recoil. The air burned, the ground cracked, reality thinned under the weight of the bloodthirster's presence. Kabanda towered over the angel, vast, horned, reefed in warp fire, a living embodiment of slaughter. Their clash was catastrophic. Sanguinius fought with speed, precision, and discipline. He struck not with rage, but with purpose. His blade flashed again and again, his wings carrying him through the storm of violence with almost supernatural grace. Kabanda fought with raw, overwhelming force. Every blow carried the hatred of Khorne himself. Each strike not merely to wound, but to corrupt, to force Sanguinius to abandon restraint and answer violence with violence. The angel held, for a time, but Kabanda was relentless. He had waited for this moment across centuries of war and bloodshed. He knew how to press the attack, how to exploit hesitation, how to turn mercy into weakness. Sanguinius fell. The moment Sanguinius was brought low, the Legion felt it. The bond between Primarch and his sons is not merely genetic. It is psychic, emotional, and absolute. When Sanguinius collapsed, the shock tore through the Blood Angels like a blade through flesh. Across the battlefield, warriors screamed as pain, not their own, flooded their minds. Something broke. The Red Thirst surged with unprecedented violence. What had once been a hunger became an avalanche. Discipline shattered. The carefully maintained restraints imposed by Sanguinius were ripped away in an instant. Blood Angels threw themselves into the enemy with reckless abandon, tearing demons apart with hands, teeth, and broken weapons. Some lost all sense of self. Some could no longer hear orders over the blood hunger. Some simply drowned in the blood. This was not victory. It was damnation. And Kabanda laughed. Sanguinius did not remain fallen. Broken and bleeding, his armor shattered, his wings torn and scorched, he lay at the edge of annihilation. In that moment, Kabanda believed he had won. This was the moment to surrender, the moment when restraint would finally be cast aside, and Sanguinius felt it, the temptation to rise in fury, to answer pain with annihilation, to become the monster that Kabanda believed him to be. It would have been so easy to surrender, but he did not. Instead, Sanguinius made a different choice. He accepted the darkness within him, without surrendering to it. Sanguinius rose, not as a god, not as a beast, but as himself, wounded, exhausted, and surrounded by death. The angel took to the air once more. This time, there was no hesitation, no mercy for the bloodthirster who stood before him. Their second clash was final and decisive. Sanguinius fought with absolute clarity. Not rage, not fear, only resolve. Every strike carried purpose. Every movement was precise, controlled, final. Kabanda was banished, cast screaming back into the void, defeated not by greater fury, but by greater will. The blood god was denied. The battle for Signus Prime ended in silence. The demonic legions were driven back. The trap had failed, but nothing had been saved. The battlefield was a carnal house. The Blood Angels stood amongst the dead, victorious, broken, and forever changed. Many warriors could not remember the battle clearly. Others remembered too much. Sanguinius looked upon his sons and understood the truth. The red thirst could no longer be hidden. It was not a flaw to be corrected. It was not a weakness to be denied. It was a curse, and it was his. In the aftermath of Signus Prime, the final illusion shattered. This had not been an isolated betrayal. It had been preparation, a test, a message written in blood. The betrayal was real, and it was already moving. Sanguinius did not rage. He did not despair. He did not curse Horus's name. Instead, he accepted what he had always known. The future was no longer distant. It was here. From that day forward, Sanguinius changed. He remained noble. He remained compassionate. He remained beloved. But the innocence was gone. He no longer merely endured his visions. He trusted them. He understood that fate was not something to escape, but something to meet with dignity. And if the Blood Angels were damned by the Red Thirst, then he would stand damned with them. He would not abandon his sons. He would not lie to them. He would carry the burden to the end. As the galaxy burned, and the Imperium tore itself apart, Sanguinius turned his gaze toward Terra. He knew what awaited him there. He knew the cost. And still, he went, because if hope was to die, it would not die alone. After Signus Prime, Sanguinius no longer doubted his visions. What had once been fragments were now a path laid bare before him. He did not know every step, every word, every wound, but he knew the destination, Terra. He knew he would stand upon its soil. He knew he would face Horus, and he knew he would not return. This knowledge did not paralyze him. It brought clarity for him. Where other Primarchs raged, despaired, or denied, Sanguinius prepared. He did not speak of his fate to his sons, nor to his brothers. He understood that prophecy could become a chain as easily as a warning. Instead, he chose to lead. As the heresy spread, Sanguinius became a symbol of resistance. Worlds fell, legions turned, brothers slaughtered brothers in the name of new gods and broken oaths. In the midst of the unravelling Imperium, the angel's presence carried weight beyond strategy. Where Sanguinius fought, morale hardened. Where he stood, despair faltered. He did not pretend the war could be won easily. He did not offer false hope. What he offered was resolve, the certainty that some things were worth defending even when defeat was inevitable. This made him dangerous, not to the enemy alone, but to despair itself. When Sanguinius arrived on Terra, the throne world was already choking beneath the weight of war. The skies burned with orbital fire. The walls trembled under relentless bombardment. The greatest fortress humanity had ever built was being reduced to rubble, piece by piece. And still, Terra held. The Emperor remained silent upon the golden throne. Bound to the impossible task of holding the warp at bay, the burden of command fell to those still able to act. Sanguinius did not claim authority. He did not need to. His presence alone was enough. At the height of the siege, the traitor legions broke through the outer defences and surged towards the Imperial Palace. Demonic hosts spilled into the inner sanctums, drawn by the psychic beacon of the Emperor himself. At the first threshold stood the Eternity Gate, the last barrier between the forces of chaos and the throne. There, Sanguinius stood at the forefront. The angel barred the way with blade and wings, his armour shattered, his strength spent, his will unbroken. For hours uncounted, he held the gate, slaughtering demons in numbers beyond reckoning. Blood soaked the marble floors. The air screamed with warp energy. And still, Sanguinius did not fall. This was not a battle meant to be won. It was a moment to hold, drawn by hatred, obsession, and fate itself. Ka'Bandha returned to Terra. Once more, the Bloodthirster sought the angel. Their final confrontation was inevitable. Ka'Bandha descended upon the Eternity Gate like a walking apocalypse, wielding a blade forged in the warp, his presence alone enough to break lesser beings. He believed this was the moment destiny had promised him. This time, there would be no escape. Sanguinius faced him, exhausted, wounded, but resolute. Their final duel was brutal beyond measure. Ka'Bandha struck with all the fury of Khorne, driving the angel to the brink of collapse. Bones broke, wings tore, blood flowed freely, and still, Sanguinius endured. With the last of his strength, he shattered Ka'Bandha's spine and cast the Bloodthirster screaming back into the warp, ending the Bloodthirster's claim upon him. The gate held. In the aftermath, Sanguinius stood before the Eternity Gate. The battlefield was silent, not in peace, but in exhaustion. He knew what came next. The visions had always led here, and beyond. There was no fear left in him now, no doubt, no hesitation, only acceptance. When the Emperor and his loyal sons boarded Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, Sanguinius went ahead of them. He did not wait for reinforcements. He did not seek counsel. He did not hesitate. He knew that this confrontation was his alone. When Sanguinius found Horus, he saw not only a traitor, but a brother, utterly consumed. Horus was no longer fully himself. He was a vessel for powers beyond comprehension. The duel was hopeless from the beginning. Horus was stronger, empowered, ascendant. Sanguinius fought anyway. Sanguinius was slain aboard the Vengeful Spirit, but he did not die easily. He fought Horus with everything he had left, blade, wings, and will, and though he could not defeat him, he wounded him, not merely in flesh, but in spirit. In his final moments, Sanguinius showed Horus what he had become, and for an instant, something within Horus cracked. That moment mattered. Sanguinius's broken body was cast aside, but his sacrifice was not in vain. The weakness he exposed would later allow the Emperor to strike Horus down. The angel died, so that humanity might endure a little longer. When Sanguinius died, his legion felt it. Across Terra, blood angels fell to their knees, screaming as the psychic shock tore through them. Many were consumed by visions of their Primarch's final moments, his rage, his pain, his defiance. This was the birth of the Black Rage, a curse that would haunt the Blood Angels forever, binding them to the memory of their father's death. Sanguinius became more than a martyr. He became a wound that would never heal. In the Imperium of Man, heroes are remembered for their victories. Sanguinius is remembered for his choice. He knew how he would die. He knew it could not be avoided, and still he chose to stand. In a galaxy ruled by cruelty, despair, and endless war, that choice matters. But sometimes, the greatest act of defiance is not survival, it is sacrifice. Sanguinius died aboard the Vengeful Spirit, but for the Blood Angels, he has never stopped dying. The moment of his death did not remain confined to history. It did not fade with time. It did not settle into memory. It became an echo. Across Terra, as the angel fell, The psychic shock tore through his legion with catastrophic force. Space Marines, hardened by decades of war, collapsed screaming. Overwhelmed by visions not their own, they saw what he saw. They felt what he felt. They died as he died. This was not grief. This was inheritance. From that moment onward, the Blood Angels were cursed. Those who succumb to the Black Rage are no longer wholly themselves. They are consumed by a waking vision of Sanguinius's final moments, his fury, his defiance, his hopeless stand against Horus. To the afflicted, the present dissolves. They believe they are Sanguinius. They believe the heresy is still unfolding. They believe Horus stands before them once more. In battle, they become unstoppable. They feel no fear. They feel no pain. They feel only purpose. But there is no return. Once the Black Rage takes hold, eventual death is all but certain. The Blood Angels do not cure it. They do not deny it. They honour it. Those lost to the Black Rage are gathered into the Death Company, clad in black armour. Their names struck from record. They are unleashed only in the most desperate battles, where survival is already unlikely. And they are given one last war. And then they are allowed to die. Sanguinius's death did more than curse his sons. It defined them. Unlike many legions shattered by the heresy, the Blood Angels did not harden into bitterness or dogma alone. They became a legion obsessed with control, of the self, of emotion, and of desire. Art, ritual, beauty. These are not indulgences for the Blood Angels. They are disciplines. Every sculpture, every poem, every act of creation is a bulwark against the hunger within. They strive for perfection, not out of vanity, but out of fear. Fear of becoming what the angel endured in his final moments. To the Imperium, Sanguinius became more than a fallen Primarch. He became a symbol. Statues of the angel stand upon 1,000 worlds. His image adorns banners, shrines, and battle standards. To the faithful, he is proof that purity and sacrifice can exist, even in a galaxy of endless war. But much of the Imperium does not remember him as he was. It remembers him as it needs to be. The doubt, the fear, the burden of foresight, those are stripped away, replaced with the image of flawless martyr. The angel becomes safe, and in doing so, much of the Imperium forgets the most important part of this story. Sanguinius was not perfect because he was without flaw. He was perfect because he endured those flaws. He feared his own nature, he feared his visions, he feared what his sons might become, and yet, at every turn, he chose restraint over rage, mercy over cruelty, sacrifice over survival. He did not believe he could save the Imperium. He believed only that he could stand, long enough for others to act, and that belief mattered. Among the Primarchs, Sanguinius's death left a wound that never fully healed. Robert Guilliman remembered him as one of the best. Rogel Dorn mourned him in silence. Even those who survived the heresy carried the knowledge that something irreplaceable had been lost. Sanguinius was proof that the Emperor's dream had not been a lie, that humanity could be better, even if it ultimately failed. Without him, the Imperium endured, but it never truly recovered. In the 41st millennium, the Imperium is a decaying empire built on fear, repression, and endless war. It still venerates Sanguinius, not because he won, not because he ruled, but because he chose to die standing. In a universe where survival often demands cruelty, Sanguinius represents the refusal to surrender one's humanity, even when that refusal guarantees death. That is why he endures, not as a god, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Sanguinius saw the future. He saw his death. He saw the Imperium broken. He saw the long, slow decay that would follow. And still, he fought, not because he believed he would win, but because someone had to stand at the end of hope and say, "This far, no further."